mentoring relationship or the master-apprentice relationship, it's totally different than hiring a coach who meets with you once a month on a schedule behind a locked door to talk about whatever. The master-apprentice relationship is a working relationship. It's a relationship where the coach and the coachee, or the master and the apprentice, are in the thick of things. They're trying to accomplish something together. And usually the way it works, and the person in the apprentice role can learn a lot just from hanging out with the person in the master role, but seeing how they conduct themselves, seeing how they make decisions, seeing how they reach goals or get results over the line.
Here's a pre-show scenario for you. Imagine you had to visit 16 houses just to cook your dinner. One place has the pots and pans, one has the stove, another has the food. You get the idea. Sounds ridiculous, right? Well, the reality is most global businesses operate the same way, using 16 different tools to hire, pay, manage, and develop their workforce. But now there's one platform that does it all, Deel. That's Deel. Deel is your forever people platform built for global payroll and HR. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deel works for your entire team. So are you ready to transform your global payroll and HR processes? If you are, click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deel today. That's Deel. Hello and welcome back to the HR L&D Podcast. I am, of course, your host. My name is Nick Day. I'm CEO at JGA Recruitment Group. For those not familiar, we are specialist HR recruiters with offices in the US, in Europe, and in the UK as well. Of course, we know the UK is in Europe, but we do specialize in global HR recruitment. So if you need support with any talent-based requirements, please do get in touch with my team. Now, let's talk about who we're going to be talking to today, because we have a truly transformative episode for you. Joining us today is Robert Hargrove, a visionary leader, author, and founder of Masterful Coaching. Now, what's going to make this episode really interesting is Robert has worked extensively with CEOs. He's also worked extensively with HR leaders and enterprise executives, and he's done that to help them unlock their greatness in organizations. And he's done so with extraordinary success. I know that's something that many of my listeners want to understand, want to achieve, and want to learn more about. So today we're really going to explore how HR leaders can become something that Robert has termed CEO whisperers. It's the power of moving beyond command and control management and why the leader as coach is the future of organizational success. Now, for those not familiar with Robert, he is the founder of the Harvard Leadership Research Project, Masterful Coaching, and Venture Catalyst Partners. Hargrove has also dedicated his career to unlocking the full potential, not just of HR leaders, but let's just say entrepreneurs as well. So let's get ready to elevate your impact in the world of HR and welcome today's guest, Robert Hargrove. Welcome to the HR L&D Podcast. How are you feeling today?
Well, I'm feeling great, and that's a very inspiring and empowering introduction.
Well, it's one that's been fully earned, and I'm really excited to get into this because I know that HR professionals are really keen to understand how they can raise their strategic profile, how can they get into that C-suite conversation a little bit more, and even sometimes how they can become the CEOs themselves. So before we get into all of that content, that rich content indeed, let me ask you the first question, which is this: what do the words human resources mean to you?
Well, I think what it means to me is that every organization is really, it's a collection of people. I think there was a great quotation from Richard Branson that I really like. He said, a company is a group of people trying to help everyone be better off. And human resources to me are the people that bring that group of people together toward a greater purpose and toward a greater calling.
Great place to start. Well, we talked, and I mentioned it briefly in my introduction there, the idea of HR leader as a CEO whisperer. I love that term. And I don't want to ruin anything by me giving a bad understanding or a bad introduction of what that really means. So I wonder if you could explain how HR leaders can build their more impactful relationship, shall we say, by working with CEOs and just bring that term CEO whisperer to life a little bit for us.
Well, let me mention a book that I came across a few years ago. It was a man in the UK called Richard Hittner, who wrote a book called The Concierge. And he made a very powerful distinction in that book that impacted my perspective or clarified it. And he said there were two kinds of leaders. There was the A leader, who is the top dog in the organization, the ace of accountability, and the ultimate decision maker. And then he said there was another kind of leader, which he called the C leader, which was the concierge, obviously drawn from the book The Godfather. And the concierge was the person who offered the wise counsel to the decisions that the CEO or business leader made that shaped the company, that shaped the country, and that ultimately shaped the world. And I think it's very important for HR leaders to see themselves not just as the HR person, but as the counterpart to the CEO. We have the CEO and we have the concierge, and the HR person can play a very powerful role in the concierge and as a concierge. I'm often called the CEO whisperer. I picked up that nickname working with the CEO of Adidas a number of years ago. And I saw myself as sort of playing two functions. One was everyone needs someone that they can talk to about whatever is really on their mind without any inhibitions or in total confidence, a trusted advisor. Everyone needs someone that can give them that wise advice that they may require, or who can walk them back when they're having an emotional reaction and about to make a really dumb move or dumb decision. So that's a lot of what I do.
I quite like the idea you mentioned there, the idea that, HR leaders in particular, but HR departments, they're often really at the heartbeat of what's happening in an organization. They're the eyes and the ears, and they get a real good sort of pulse or temperature check on what's going on within the broader organization, which sometimes can be hidden a little bit from the C-suite. Let's be honest, we don't always say what we really think to those in real power because we're worried about our own position, but actually right down to the bottom of the chain, if there is such a thing within an organization in the hierarchical structure, HR teams really get to understand what's going on under the hood. I know that we spoke briefly offline before we started this show, and you said, Nick, for me, there are 5 key roles that HR leaders play. Tell us a little bit more about what those 5 roles were, because I found them really interesting.
Time out for a second. You're coming across blurry to me. I don't know how I'm coming across to you.
No, you're absolutely fine. I might be blurry your end because it's recorded in separate channels. So it's hosted on my computer, hosted on yours. So
okay, so I just didn't want to waste it if it wasn't coming in good. So no, you made a good point. Maybe you could reintroduce that the HR people are often the eyes and the ears of the organization. Yeah. Can you reintroduce this point?
Absolutely. Well, but I really like what you had to say there, because something that I think is really interesting is HR teams are often the eyes and the ears of an organization, particularly for the CEOs that they're often reporting to. They get a really good sense of the pulse, the temperature of an organization, what's going on and how it's feeling, how it's moving culturally as well. And I know that we spoke briefly offline and you said to me, Nick, for me, there are 5 critical roles HR leaders can play. I wonder if you can just bring that to life for us, because I found it really interesting.
Well, one again, I'd like to say again, the role of the CEO whisperer. There is something that I call the loneliness of command. CEOs often exist in a kind of bubble. The information that everything that is said to them is said in a filtered way, either to please them or to avoid getting in trouble or avoid getting yelled at. So the information they get is often not valid. I think the HR leader has a very crucial role to play in helping the CEO kind of step out of their bubble and get a sense of what's happening in the hearts and minds of everybody in the organization. And there may be sometimes things that the CEO, you may have to start the conversation with, I know this is something that you may not want to hear, but people in the organization are feeling resigned about this situation or disempowered about that, and here's what you can do to transform that. I think that's very. I think a large part of the role of the CEO whisperer is providing the CEO with valid information about what's really happening in the organization, the minds and hearts of people. So that's number one. I think the second role of the HR leader I remember, I think I wrote a title for this podcast called Becoming the HR Leader Your Business Needs. Is being what I would call a talent maven. And one of the things I've noticed over the years is that almost everything about the modern corporation has been revolutionized. We have now, we don't have just big companies like General Motors and IBM and Intel. We have disruptive innovation. We have digitalization of all the processes. We have whole new ways of coming up with products and services through collaboration and creativity. But one of the things I noticed has not changed. It's changed very, very little. Is traditional HR practices. I think in many cases, and I wouldn't say that to everyone because I don't want to offend the audience, but in many cases, traditional HR hiring practices have stayed exactly the same as they were 50 years ago. And it's what happens is that when it comes to hiring people, HR leaders often get trapped in matching job descriptions to resumes. It's kind of like a sort of if you were trying to get into a great college, whether it was Oxford or Harvard or Stanford, you look at the students' SAT scores, you look at their grades, you look at their teacher recommendations, and you decide just on this kind of like check the box basis. But what often happens is that you leave out you hire the people that check the boxes, but you leave out all the creative and innovative, and you leave out people who are really can be a force of nature in the company. If you were to go back 30 years ago, people like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and maybe probably Elon Musk would never have made it past the hiring interview or even sending in their resume because they didn't check enough of those boxes. So I think that the role of the HR leader today should start with the notion of hiring exceptional people. And there was a great quote I once came across from the founder of Home Depot, Arthur Blank, when he was asked by the HR person, what kind of COO should you want us to hire? He said, "Get me the best in the world." That needs to be the framework. Get me the best in the world. Hire exceptional people, and go beyond the matching job descriptions to resumes, and where you wind up, you're usually hiring a bunch of conformists, and hire iconoclasts who don't fit the mold rather than conformists. So that's
I mean, just to
point
interject
two.
before you
Let me hear your comments.
before you get to the third, Robert, as a recruitment expert in this space with over 2 decades of experience in placing HR professionals in particular, I couldn't agree more. Everything you've said is music to my ears, and I really hope it resonates with my audience, because for me, we're getting a lot of talking about AI-driven recruitment tools that can speed up the process, but for me, algorithmic recruitment doesn't work. If you just try and connect box to box and you take the personality and the attributes out of an application, particularly in an organization or a role where soft skills are so important, things like empathy, things like tenacity and persistence and things like that, you can't assess those in quite the same way using an algorithmic method, using tools and checkboxes. And I think that attributes are the real currency of the future anyway. And that's where really, for me, as a recruitment expert in this space, obviously this is my viewpoint because this is how one of our differentiators, we get to know our candidates before we place them with an organization. We make sure they fit the cultural, status that they're playing, the kind of individual we think will propel their organization forward, the kind of individual that will evolve their culture rather than just keep it as it is. And I think that's really important if we're going to get this right going forward. So everything you've just said there was like, wow, this resonates with me. I'm hoping it's resonating with my HR.
Well, I think you make a great point there, is that you want to hire people that can help the organization create a new future versus just optimize the past. And your points about using AI or the limitations of that are also very interesting. I wonder what my life would have been like if I was a recruiter. But one thing I pride myself on is that I love talent and know where to find it. Sometimes the CEO will ask me, "Can you find me someone for this job or that job?" And I think one of my greatest strengths is something you could never get from AI. I'm a people watcher. I'm a connoisseur of talent. I remember riding the London Tube and used to enjoy looking at everybody on the train and trying to spot people with high potential or people who were CEOs dressed in gray suits or people who were talented. I just personally relish that. So I think every HR person should become a connoisseur of talent and should spend a lot more time people watching versus plowing through resumes.
I think I'm about to take that connoisseur of talent. I love that as a phrase. I'll credit to you, Robert. I might see that pop up on one of my LinkedIn posts coming up.
Well,
I think you make another
you're
interesting.
perfectly welcome to do that, but it's you have to be someone that just like you would go to a great restaurant. I remember when my trips to London, I always used to go to Rule's restaurant. It was very enjoyable, and even there, I would be people watching. You want to be a people watcher, not a bureaucrat. Okay, so the third point, we got CEO whisperers, the first role. Second role is a talent maven. Think, get me the best in the world. And the third one I made is being a people developer. So if I look back over my many years of coaching CEOs and organizations, the HR person, the best HR people are the ones who are always championing coaching and training and counseling and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to talk them into it. They're ready to jump on board, even when the CEO may be a little slow or reluctant to do so. So this is something that I think everybody could, everyone listening to this could ask themselves, what have I done to champion coaching, mentoring, or training lately? Nick, what do you say to that?
Yeah, well, I think it's something that probably isn't asked enough. I think there has been we've seen a big transition away from command and control into more coaching mindset and growth mindset type organizations, but I think we're still got a fair way to go. I think understanding the principles is one thing, applying them is something else. And I still think that's probably where we are at the moment. I think the HR leaders probably understand where they want to get to, but the application of getting there is actually more challenging, or they're not fully versed yet in knowing how to come away from that command and control environment into, a work environment really that does have great results in terms of retention, employee engagement, and results as a result, right? And I think they understand the concepts, but the application is still a bit of a challenge. Would be my assessment.
Well, after I wrote my first book, Masterful Coaching, which was pretty widely considered a landmark book, the Wall Street Journal said Robert Hargrove wrote the book that changed the world of consulting, training, and coaching forever. I'm proud of that. I wrote another book called the Masterful Coaching Field Book, which was about the leader as coach. And that actually did not take off as well as the first book, because a lot of leaders were, sort of remained stuck in the command and control model. It's a totally different model. But there was another book I'd like to mention to you. It's called The Super Bosses by a man by the name of Sidney Finkelstein. And he discovered that the top CEOs, the CEO titans, whose names we all know, whether it's Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, or Jeff Bezos or Jamie Dimon or whoever, are people who, what defines the super bosses are their leaders who excel they're exceptional leaders who excel at developing other exceptional leaders. In other words, they don't see their job as I mentioned earlier, the top dog, the ace of accountability, the final decision maker. They see their job really as developing people. And there's another word I've been using a lot lately as an alternative to coaching, because sometimes coaching is misunderstood, and that is the master-apprentice relationship. Every CEO should have a master-apprentice relationship with the people on their team. And I believe the same is true for HR leaders. Every HR leader should be in a master-apprentice relationship with someone they really admire and respect in their role, who's another HR person, and they should be developing the people on their team. So a good question for people to ask themselves is, have you established, the HR folks, a master-apprentice relationship with the people on your team? Do you have are there 2 or 3 people on your team that could step in for you tomorrow, for example? One other point I want to make here before I go to the next one is One of the things that I found a little bit disappointing is that HR people tend to think that coaching and mentoring is for other people, not for them. They don't. They often have the attitude that they either don't need coaching, mentoring, or they don't deserve it, or the company wouldn't pay for it. And I think that's a sad story because HR people they're what I call enterprise leaders. If they make decisions that impact the whole organization, and they need coaching and mentoring as much as anyone else, as the CEO or CTO or anyone else. Right? Let's hear your comment.
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more with the latter. I mean, I work as an qualified executive coach myself, and I think the one thing I always find interesting when we talk about this subject, because a lot of leaders, we often teach the things we most need to learn, right? So HR leaders will be saying to others they need coaching, but will rarely take coaching on for themselves. I think that's always an interesting dynamic. I think that's because often we live in our heads. So the HR leaders out there will go, well, I don't need I know what I want to do. I know what I want to achieve. But if you're in your head, it's amazing how different something sounds when you say something out loud. And that's something the coach can do for you. So working with a coach and getting all of those thoughts out in one place, it's amazing how different something sounds when you speak it out loud to a sounding board. And I love the Michael Neal quote where he said, if everyone stood outside and spoke to a lamppost for 30 minutes a day, it would have dramatic effects. And just imagine if that lamppost could talk back. And that's what a coach can do. It can just help push your thinking, make you think more laterally. You'll come up with new ideas. It opens up the mind. But I think because we're in control of our own minds, we often don't appreciate that that's true. We think, well, I know the answers. I know which way I want to go. I know what I'm going to do. But we don't have the opportunity to explore it in a different environment. And I think if they were to do that, actually, it would have a phenomenal impact on the world of work and the way that we get from A to B in terms of how to grow a business and how to build a business. So I couldn't agree with everything you've said there, Mo. I think there is a lack of coaching, certainly being utilized at the senior end of the HR spectrum and the organizations and individuals that I work with. And yet those individuals, as amazing as they are, they often promote coaching to their workforce, but they don't promote it for themselves.
As I mentioned a few minutes ago, that the CEO needs someone they can talk to about whatever is really on their mind. And I think you raised the point that whether you call it a coach or something else, the HR person needs someone they can talk to about whatever is really on their mind. And your lamppost analogy, it's a really great one. I think that's a very powerful idea. But let me impress upon you, just to emphasize before we go to the next point, the importance of this master-apprentice relationship, because that's what I'm discovering in my work today is there's one form of coaching is hiring an external coach into your organization to coach the executive team or HR, whoever. Another is for the HR person or for the CEO or the senior leadership team to all engage in a master-apprentice relationship with their employees. This is something that can really develop a high-performance team and make sure that when somebody leaves the organization, there are successors who can step in.
Can I ask a question, Robert? Just for my own distinction and to make sure that my listeners are fully following as well. When you talk about this master-apprentice relationship, how does that differ from mentoring? Because my distinction of mentoring would be something similar. So coaching would be you don't necessarily need experience in that sector. We're not giving advice, we're listening. But mentoring actually can involve someone with expertise that can help give advice, help give direction. They've worked in that space. So is there a difference between the two? Or
well, first of all, I'd like to clear up a misconception about coaching. After I wrote my book of Masterful Coaching, a number of organizations came around that started offering certification programs. And these coaching certification programs were all based on a psychiatric model, where you can't give advice, all you can do is ask questions. I think this is a foolhardy and fallacious model. If you look at any great coach in sports or the performing arts or in business, they don't just ask questions. They give advice, they give direction, they say things that are designed to help the person perform at a higher level than they did today. Imagine you had a coach of a football team who could only ask questions and could never ever give any directives or give any advice. Now, you ask another point about mentoring. That's a very good question because If you ask people what mentoring means, you know what it really means for most people? Nothing. Mentoring for most people means, okay, someone in my company, someone in my school, someone in my government that offers me, that kind of cares about me and offers me occasional word of advice. When we're talking about the master-apprentice relationship, think about it like from time immemorial. All the great leaders in the arts, Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, Winston Churchill, in science, Albert Einstein, in music, Johann Sebastian Bach. He's an interesting case. Johann Sebastian Bach was a great musician, but in his time, his son eclipsed him. He became more popular and more powerful but he was mentored by his father to become a great composer and a great conductor. So in a mentoring relationship or the master-apprentice relationship it's not like you. It's totally different than hiring a coach who meets with you once a month on a schedule behind a locked door to talk about whatever. The master-apprentice relationship is a working relationship. It's a relationship where the coach and the coachee, or the master and the apprentice, are in the thick of things. They're trying to accomplish something together. And usually the way it works, and the person in the apprentice role can learn a lot just from hanging out with the person in the master role, but seeing how they conduct themselves, seeing how they make decisions, seeing how they reach goals or get results over the line. And it's usually one where the master, I'm using this word not literally, but metaphorically, assigns you a task, assigns you a job. They delegate that job to you. So it's high delegation, but it's all high touch. They step in and they're willing to give you advice when they see you going off course, or if you need it, or be there to answer a question. So I know this is a new concept, but it's new. It may be new to HR people, but it's actually been going on. This master apprentice thing has been going on for thousands of years. And it's the way we develop kings. It's the way we develop presidents. It's the way we develop great scientists and great artists and great symphony orchestra conductors and composers.
No, that's good. That's good. I'm glad I asked the questions. I think that's bringing it to life a little bit. So I know that in some of the content I followed of your work prior to the show, Robert, you've talked a lot about how every HR professional should see themselves as a business person. So that's, again, a relatively new concept for many. But how can HR leaders shift their mindset to think and act more strategically in that regard? I mean, even if we talk about the CEO whisperer as an example, and I think you gave a great example where the CEO of Adidas said, you like the CEO whisperer, and gave you that term. But for some, they may not even know how to get into that inner circle. They don't even know how to get into that inner circle of a CEO's, to be that relied upon person of the CEO. So any guidance you've got how they can think and change that mindset? Hello, HR and people leaders. Are you exhausted of the war for talent cliche? The problem is when we hear a cliche, it usually exists for a reason. However, we think it's time for a fresh approach to the talent crisis. That's because at JGA Recruitment, we understand the real challenges you face in sourcing phenomenal HR and people candidates. And guess what? We think we have the solution. Our team is on a mission to revolutionize your hiring process. That's because we're not just recruiters. We're strategic partners dedicated to finding HR and people professionals who align perfectly with your company's vision and goals. So let's break the cycle of frustration together. Partner your talent acquisition strategies with JGA Recruitment and experience the difference in service, excellence, and results. No longer do you need to suffer the costs associated with a poor hire, because with over 100 five-star Google reviews and already trusted by many of the world's leading brands, why don't you take action today? Contact us at jgarecruitment.com to discover how we can help transform your HR and people teams. And here's a bonus. When you visit us, you can sign up for our weekly HR newsletter that's packed with invaluable industry insights and more. Let's revolutionize your HR talent acquisition strategies together and make the war for talent a cry from the past. Visit jjrecruitment.com to find out more.
Well, I think every person in the company should see themselves as a business person, not just as as an engineer or an underwriter. They should see themselves as a business person. So it's everywhere. Every person should have the job of helping the company to grow, helping the company to identify opportunities, helping the company to do something that helps everyone be better off, and definitely helping the company to make money. One of the unfortunate things I noticed about senior HR people is they often don't have a clue about how the company makes money. And I've been in many business meetings, strategy and budget review meetings, where the CEO or whoever it is will stand up in front of the room with a PowerPoint presentation going over the budget of the organization. And you can see that oftentimes the HR person is not financially literate. They can't understand. They may understand some things about the strategy, but they don't understand anything about the financial dynamics of the organization. And this is one of the things that may keep them sometimes from being respected as a business person. So I think one of the goals for HR people is to make it a point to understand what business company is in, what problems it solves for customers, and how the company makes money, and have at least some degree of financial literacy. If you do, that will help you to move into the inner circle of the organization, of the senior leadership team, versus being a little bit on the outside.
No, that's helpful. I know that certainly for HR leaders, one of their biggest challenges they often have to face is driving transformative change, particularly cultural change. What would be your approach? So what approach would you recommend to HR professionals when it comes to designing and rolling out a culture change initiative or a transformation initiative?
Well, when I was thinking about this, I think one of the most powerful roles, we mentioned CEO whisperer, we mentioned talent maven, people developer. I think the next one is really a cultural architect, which is a term I think I may have heard from you originally.
Yeah, I think change agent, cultural architect for sure. I think that's something that sums up a role of an HR professional, or certainly part of the role of HR professional very well.
And so, but one of the things I've noticed in working with many CEOs and companies, and I don't just work with CEOs, but managing directors or business unit managers or whatever, is the HR can bend over backwards to hire great people for the company, people who are geniuses in some respect. However, in most companies, in most large companies, for example, it's very hard for these people that you've bent over backwards to hire to do their best work. In many of the companies I've worked with over the years, I wouldn't call them at least when I came in, a culture of possibility, a culture of opportunity. What I found oftentimes was a culture of resignation, where people would often, or people after a while, they come in full of enthusiasm, 6 months and a year or so, and then give up because of all the hierarchical sign-offs and bureaucratic hoops they had to jump through to get anything done. So I think one of the ways that the HR person can play a huge role, I hope I'm not overwhelming people with too many ideas, is to start to break down the hierarchy and look for ways to break down the hierarchy and bureaucracy. You know, your question was, how can HR leaders create a culture change in this respect? Well, one of the things I've done I did with the CEO of Adidas and Nike and ExxonMobil was similar to what Jack Welch used to call the workout session. We bring the CEO and the HR leader together in front of a group of people. Maybe we might have like 30 town meetings, and people will talk about what their goals are and what their and what obstacles, hierarchical or bureaucratic obstacles, they're facing in terms of being able to do their best work and accomplish their goals. And they're encouraged to actually speak up and say whatever is really on their mind. And present in the meeting, as I said, could be the CEO or business unit manager, the HR leader, and the group. And in these types of meetings, the CEO can immediately say, "Okay, this is in the way. We're going to see if we can. We're going to eliminate the need for approval on that. You do what you need to do." or we're gonna get rid of this bureaucratic red tape. Or they may defer it and say, I'm not sure how we're going to handle it. Well, let me come back to you about that. That's called a workout session. And if you do, 5 or 10 or 15 of those in a company, it's amazing how you free people up to do their best work. The truth is, a lot of people in big companies are in pain, and part of the job of the HR person is to get them out of pain and give them the freedom to achieve what they need to achieve.
Well, I like that example. I like it for a couple of reasons. One is actually it's a great example of what a coaching culture can look like, because you call it a workout session, right? But ultimately, it's a process there which is facilitating the opportunity for a group of people or organization to move forward towards a shared goal, but also towards individual goals as well. It's a chance to air the concerns, the resistance, and work through it in a way that's going to be more fulfilling for the organization, more fulfilling for the individual. And it's a great example of what it absolutely is really in contradiction to what a command and control culture would be. So I think I know it comes very natural to you to talk always with a coaching mindset, but actually you framed that brilliantly for those that don't quite understand what that is. That's a great example from my perspective.
Yes, and imagine that a lot of people wake up in the morning and go for a walk down the street or on the beach or whatever, thinking about things they would really like to tell the CEO or the business unit manager or the HR leader if they only had a chance, except that they have no chance. So it just, they wake up again the next morning, have the same conversation, except where they have it themselves. And this workout method is a way for them to gives them permission to have the conversation with the right person. There's another dimension of this that I think is important, is that the most organizations are as they get bigger, they become more hierarchical and more bureaucratic, and everyone's in their little box. And oftentimes the people in their little boxes don't really talk to each other that much. We have a process called the Collab Lab, which involves getting people together from all, let's say you have some kind of moonshot goal from the different areas of the organization, and creatively collaborate on reaching a goal by getting everybody in the same room, creating a vision, creating a strategy, creating a game plan, and doing all kinds of creative exercises to facilitate that. I feel anything the HR people can do to create a forum to make it possible for people to get out of their box and collaborate, whether it's around the coffee clutch or the water cooler or wherever, is very important. I think the HR person should be intimately involved in the design of buildings. Winston Churchill said, "We design our buildings, and then our buildings design us." I think this is a really crucial point. I have one last point I wanted to make of my 5 points, but please comment on this before I go on.
No, I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm enjoying listening to the insight, to be honest. I know that I was going to ask a question because I thought it related, it would sit with what you just mentioned there about the HR leader's role, but you often advocate for HR leaders to create a vision of an impossible future. And I don't know if that's where it would sit. Is that where this is part of their responsibility, really? And what does that mean? And how does that help with the visionary process? How does that help?
I think that the HR, that's where we come back to the CEO whisper. The CEO and the HR leader should create a climate or environment where people go for an impossible future rather than just try to optimize the present or the past. Do you know how many companies, if you look at the New York Stock Exchange or maybe the FTSE 100 or whatever the number is, an extraordinary, almost 30% of companies that were in business that were listed 15 years ago are out of business today. Yeah, that's because people focused on optimizing the present and optimizing the past rather than creating a new future. So this is something very important, but let me tell you a story about this. A CEO friend I know who now sits on the ExxonMobil board, which gives him a certain level of authority in people's minds. He told me that he went back to his old company where he was an MD in London for a company called ConocoPhillips at the time. And he told me that so they had a kind of sort of a company reunion of people who worked in the company 10 or 15 years ago. And the guy that was his boss when he was the MD at ConocoPhillips in London, my friend's name is Greg, and the boss name was Rick. He said, Greg, he talked about his grandchildren, but then he started talking about, in some ways my career has been I've made enough money. I made a lot of money. Money's not an issue for me. But you know what I did my whole career? Greg said, what he said. I said, well, I know some people may not appreciate a baseball analogy. He said, I spent my whole career hitting singles in baseball, going to first base. And I hit a lot of singles, in part because I wanted to show that I could accomplish something, and in part because I was afraid that if I try to go for a longer hit, my boss might not approve. He said, I really regret after all these years that I never swung for the fences. I never swung to hit a home run. I was always afraid to strike out, so I just hit a single. That was an interesting reflection for someone that was actually at a very high level of leadership and management. But when the company, interestingly enough, when the company that he was a part of, was called Conoco at the time, merged, he was dismissed because he wasn't seen as swinging for the fences or achieving something impossible or part of a new future. So I hope every HR person listening to this takes this story to heart. I'm sure every day a lot of our listeners are going to the office and they're hitting singles. Well, how about swinging for the fences as an HR leader? What would that mean for you? I mean, if your chances are you're not going to get in trouble if you go for it, or if you even take a swing at it.
Sure. I mean, look, there's three concepts, if you like, that come to mind during that sort of wonderful story, and I couldn't agree more with the message that it sends. One is that I'm a massive believer, and people that have listened to this show regularly will know it comes up a lot in the way that I talk about the world of HR and the way that I see things. But I think often our potential lives on the other side of our fear. And if we never lean into it, we'll never discover it. But there's also the idea of what got us here won't get us there. Now, the singles he's been hitting may have got him into that position, but what got you here won't get you there. And there's got to be some point when you reach out and you give it a swing, in using your analogy there. And I think that's the same for HR professionals. And in terms of building that impossible futures where this came to life, it's like, if you're going to get there, right, what's got you to this point is giving you the opportunity now to take the swing. You can't keep doing what you always did. Eventually, you're dead in water. You're procrastinating, and you stop moving forward. And it links also to Cadone's thinking of the 10x thinking. Right? I do this with my team in recruitment. I was like, give me some ideas. Now, don't give me the idea of what working 2 times harder to get this, to get double the results. Give me an idea that's going to multiply the result by 10. And I know it's impossible. It looks similar to the impossible future, right? In your heads, it's impossible. But you know what? When you think about a 10x mindset, the ideas you come up with now are going to be radically different to the ideas you gave me 5 minutes ago when you were having a 2x mindset. So I think a lot of this fits in. I love the idea of creating a vision for an impossible future.
Yeah, I like combining swinging for the fences with your baseball bat with Grant Cardone's 10x thinking. And there's another guy that wrote a book. I can't remember his name at the moment. He said 10x is easier than 2x.
I think I've got it. Actually, I do know. I've got it on my mantelpiece here somewhere. So I can probably find the author. Yeah,
that's a good title. But I really hope that the people listening to this, I shouldn't say the people, that you who are listening to this, don't listen to this podcast as an intellectual exercise. Robert and Nick made a good point about this and made a book about that. I hope when you listen to this podcast, you wake up the next day fully resolved to swing for the fences, to come up with 10x ideas, and to recognize that your potential on the other side, fear is what's on the other side of your potential. Let go of your fear, then go for it.
Couldn't agree more. Take action. Take action. And leads me lovely into the fifth one. I think you had a fifth point. I think I interjected before you got there.
Oh, well, yeah. The fifth point is, it comes down to, you said something really earlier that I really liked, but I was so caught up in my own thoughts that I overlooked it, and that is that making sure that people have the opportunity to be the best that they can be. And based on many years of experience, I found that the HR person in the organization has to be more than just a people pleaser. And this will sound very crude, but one senior HR guy told me that his job was to put his nose where the sun didn't shine and do whatever he could to please the CEO or the managing director, and to conform and to make sure everything conformed to the company policy. So I found in many cases, and I hate to say this, that HR people, human resource people, are not people oriented. They're hierarchically oriented. They're bureaucratically oriented. They're policy oriented. They're please the CEO oriented. Okay, so you have to if you want to become one of the best HR people in the world, you got to stop that. And one of the best ways you can stop that is one of the distinguishing differences, how I recognize people who are great HR leaders, is they're the people that when one of the talented, high potential emerging leaders in the organization has a problem, they know that they can go to the HR leader who's going to be an advocate for them, not just present them with a rule or a policy or a line on the form that says they can't do it, or they can't have what they want. Let me give you a concrete example. I was speaking to a woman by the name of Sasha, who works in the HR department of an American company. Except she doesn't work in America. She's from Serbia, and she was just making enough money to get by, and she asked for 100% raise. She was being paid less than a half of what people were paid in the United States. That actually may be. And they decided they wouldn't give her a 100% raise. They gave her a 50% raise. So I said to her, well, what does that 50% raise do for you? He said, well, it allows me to put food on the table and pay my rent and join the gym. I said, well, what would another 10% do to you? Well, another 10% would allow me to send my kids to, maybe take my kids to Disneyland this year. And so she called up the HR manager, the senior HR manager, and said, okay, you denied my request for 100% raise, but what about another 10%? And the HR manager said, no, that we have a rule that level of raise is just not possible in this company. And as a result, I could see this person, Sasha, coming from an enthusiastic champion for the organization to someone who is profoundly resigned. I want to encourage you listening to be the person that people can go to that will know that will be the advocate for them, even though you can't promise them the sky and the moon.
Great point. It's a great point. And I think that's where most HRs would like to want to get to as well. They want to be that person. It's just sometimes we don't always have the pathway to get there. Or the roadmap gets blocked because we're plate spinning so many different areas of and things we're responsible for in the world of HR. I want to just finish the show today with a question of, I don't know where to ask this really, or where to go with this, Robert, if I'm honest, because you're an author of over 10 books. You've got a wonderful approach in terms of your coaching methodology. I know some of your clients, for those not familiar here, to bring in some context, Robert's clients have included the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange, the Fortune 500 CEO of the year, the European CEO Entrepreneur of the Year, various presidential appointees, and more, right? So I wonder if I'm going to give you the floor and say, what products, what books, what elements of your approach would you like to share with our listeners? Where can they find out more about your expertise? And if they want to take that first step into masterful coaching and really getting to grips with some of the principles that we've kind of laid the foundation for today, where would you direct them?
Well, let me sort of round up everything I said. I gave 5 points: CEO whisperer, talent maven, people developer, cultural change architect, champion, employee champion. I think one of the most important points to round things off is the point about being the CEO becoming the CEO whisperer, or recognizing that your role, that there's two types of leaders: that of the CEO or managing director, and that of the concierge. In order for the HR leader to accomplish anything, any of these other things we talked about, they have to have power. Being able to make your vision as the HR manager a reality, you have to find the path to power and influence yourself. And one of the best ways to do that is to become a CEO whisperer. However, in order for you to become a CEO whisperer, I love the point you made. Your potential is on the other side of the fear. You may need an HR whisperer yourself to go beyond the fear that you're currently experiencing. So, if you want to find out how we can help you, I would invite you to look at the Masterful Coaching website. That's masterfulcoaching.com. There's a whole panorama of various things that we offer, but at the end of the day, they're all about helping people and organizations realize their potential. You can see I'm very passionate still about what I do. I'm on LinkedIn. You can catch me on LinkedIn, Robert Hargrove. I would really encourage everyone. You talked about, you made a very good point that people, there's a difference between knowing what and applying it, knowing what and knowing how. The beauty of that thing, if people are interested in this Master-Apprentice relationship, is you can sit in a room and give people the 5 bullet points of being an HR manager in a day. But it takes working with a coach yourself over the course of 6 months or a year to actually be able to integrate and apply those points. If you think that your CEO or the members of your executive team would benefit from having a Masterful coach, we'd love to hear from you. So let me give you a few little details. www.masterfulcoaching.com. My email is robert.hargrove, Hargrove, at rhargrove.com. I'd like to make a little bit of an offer to everyone here. I just wrote an article that might be interesting to the listeners, and that is called "Passing the Torch: A Groundbreaking Approach to Succession." I'll offer that free to anyone who goes to our website or connects with me on LinkedIn. And what it's about, succession isn't just, since you're a recruiter, succession isn't just about calling a recruiter and finding a name to put in the hat. It's developing a pipeline of transformational leaders within through coaching, mentoring, and this master-apprentice relationship.
Love that. Love that. Fantastic. Well, look, for those that are interested in finding out more, just if you didn't get the domains there directly from Robert, or you're listening and you're driving or anything like that, just to let you all know, the links will be in the show notes of this episode. So just click straight through. I will make sure there's a link to Robert's LinkedIn profile, his email, and his coaching website, masterfulcoaching.com, in the show notes here. So you don't need to navigate away or worry about writing things down. You can find it straight here through the podcast show notes. And something I want to just slightly add to, just to finish the main part of the show, the questions there, Robert, is you mentioned that you reminded us all of that difficulty of going from knowing what to do and how to apply it. And there's a gap there that we often struggle with. I'm a big fan of, it's not about the how, which can freeze us. It's about the who. And you talked about meeting people on a train at the start of this and the people, the connections you've made. This is a great example of an opportunity, I think, for the people listening to this to go, you know what, there's a who right in front of you now, which is Robert Hargrove. You can go to his website. You can find out a masterful way of applying the principles that you've learned and you've delivered over many years of experience to help people out of that place of fear, that place of procrastination, which can happen when they go, you know what, I know I want to do, but I don't know where to start. There's a framework here you can follow. And if you go to that website, hopefully that will guide them. There's 10 books and more they can download. There's an approach they can learn more about. And focus on the who you know to get you there. And that'll get the wheels turning.
Well, that's beautiful. And you're a great interviewer. That somebody once said, what makes a great leader is not being interesting, but being interested. And you really come across as being interested, and that helped me to fully express myself. So
Well, thank you.
I
You're
really
very kind.
admire
I've
you and respect you for that.
thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, everything you've said has resonated with my view of HR at the moment. So I've thoroughly enjoyed every moment. So I'm going to just ask three short, sharp questions of you, Robert. If you've got just a moment more of your time, if I can steal as much as I can, it's too valuable for our listeners. So let's open the HR L&D vault. My first question is this: if you could give one piece of advice to HR leaders working in the world of work right now, what would it be?
I used to have a T-shirt that said "I love people." And I think one of the things that HR leaders, one of the roles that I actually left out for the HR leader, I kept wanting to reduce it to 5, was being an administrative expert. So I think many HR leaders are administrative experts in things like salary and benefits and deferred compensation plans, but sometimes they forget that it's really about people. So what I like to remind people of, my first point would be your job is to make real the power of love in business, loving the customer, loving your employees. I won't say loving your boss, but you may want to consider that.
Sure.
There was the second one is a little quotation I heard from Kevin O'Leary, one of the people on Shark Tank. Are you familiar with the Shark Tank show?
I am very familiar. Yeah.
Okay, so he said, what is the fastest way to make $1 million? And his answer was, I thought it was a great answer, both from a personal point of view and an organization. He said, solve a problem for a customer. And if you think about it, all great businesses they do one thing: they solve a problem for a customer. And he gave the example and said, for thousands of years, people have sold shoes because it solved the problem of people having sore feet or having something to walk on without getting their feet cut up. So, but when you solve a problem for your customer, the result is you have cash flow. People pay you money for whatever it is you offer. Now, how does this relate to the HR? I think the HR person is a person that, the great HR person is the person who inherently recognizes that if you treat your employees right, they'll treat your customers right. They will help your customers solve problems, and it will result in greater economic growth and business growth and profit growth. So, treating employees well is not just sentimentality. It's not just something soft. Soft is hard. Treat your employees right, and it will. I had a good quotation, if I can find it, from Richard Branson a few minutes ago. Let me see. It might be worth it. Richard Branson famously said, "Take care of your employees, and they'll take care of your customers, and that will result in cash flow and EBITDA, earnings per EPGA." So that's my point two. And the third point is spend more time people watching. That's going to be a lot of times I went into organizations over the years, and I would have a meeting with someone, and I would notice something about them, like they had a daughter or they had a father that was an ex football player, or this person wanted to go to the top of the organization. Then I'd go talk to the people in the HR and say, "Did you know this about Joe?" I said, "No, I never talked to Joe." I said, "Well, he's only 2 doors down the hall." So spend more time talking to people about stuff that you don't normally talk about. Ask questions. Asking questions is a great way to get to know people. There's 3 questions, maybe even my final shot here. So I ask people, they tell you a tremendous amount about people. This could be used in hiring interviews or wherever. One is, where were you born? Well, if you ask someone where you were born, where people were born tells you a tremendous amount about them. What kind of family background did you come from? What were your mother and father like? What did your father do for a living? Are you married? Do you have kids? I mean, those 3 questions, and then finally, what do you do for a living? Or what would you like to do? I found that I could write a book on many people based on just answering those 4 questions. And when you show interest in people, they'll show interest back. So Sorry to go on, but
Not
you've drawn me out.
Definitely don't apologize. Curiosity is such an important skill that's underrated, and it links so closely, of course, to a coaching mindset and a coaching culture. So asking questions is paramount to that, right? We can't listen to our workforces, and we can't listen to what's going on if we're not willing to ask the questions in the first place. Interestingly, something that came, I haven't thought about this for a long time, but you mentioned the shoes in your example. And I was thinking, actually, what you're describing here is a creative mindset. And a lot of people sort of go day to day with a reported mindset, right? And there's a story that I don't know if I'm going to deliver this exactly how it was first told, but my recollection of the story is this. There was once an American shoemaker, and he had two sons, and he sent his sons away to, I think it was maybe in Africa or somewhere similar, many years ago when no one really wore shoes. And the first son landed, and he said, called his dad and said, "Why have you sent me here?" He said, "No one wears any shoes. How can I possibly make a living when no one wears shoes here?" And got on the first flight back. The second son called his dad and said, "Dad, no one here wears shoes. I'm going to make $1 million." And it's the idea that you can report on what you see, or you can have a creative mindset to solving a problem, linking back to that £1 million Shark Tank example.
Oh, that's a very good. That's very good.
It's very easy to report on what's happening. We can do that in any profession. It doesn't have to be in HR to say, you know what, the problem we have is this. It takes something else to have a creative mindset to work on actually solving the problem to see where that can take you. And that's where your story.
I have a question I want to ask you about you, because we talked a lot about me. So I'm actually very interested. One of the things I've discovered in working with CEOs and founders is that the best ones, I call them the CEO titans or the super bosses, are people who have come to the essential insight that if I surround myself with a team of extraordinary leaders, I'm going to be very successful. And so how do you find those extraordinary leaders? Well, one approach is to develop those extraordinary leaders from within. And the other is recruitment. So I'd like to ask you, what does your company do to help organizations, help CEOs and founders recruit exceptional people, not just the average? And what does your company do differently than others?
It's a great question. I think a lot of it links back to that having conversations piece, which may sound obvious, but actually a lot of people now are email warriors and don't ever get involved in the conversational piece. I think for us, there's a major challenge in the world of recruitment. That most people think that it's easy because they can find talent. I'll try and explain that's not the challenge anymore. The challenge is in engagement. I get emails every day from people telling me about jobs, right? And most of the time I delete that email or I don't look at it because I don't know who that person is. But I know if I put an email into yourself, Robert, as an example, now that we've connected today, and I said, Robert, if you've got 10 minutes of your time, I'd like to just have a chat with you. You don't know what it is I've got for you at that point. I'd like to think, you know what, Nick, I can find 10 minutes. Let's have a chat. At that point, we're engaged. I can bring any opportunity I like to the table, and you can say yes, no, or maybe. But we do a lot of things like that offline people don't see. So we have a lot of WhatsApp leadership groups in the world of HR, in the world of payroll, which is another division that we have. We have more WhatsApp channels, actually, which is a job in itself. We try and stay engaged with our communities, and we try and make sure we're always delivering value. This podcast being an example. So we're not just trying to immediately go for the commercial return. It's about relationships. And what we do know is, and this may sound cliche, but I always say, if you hear a cliche, right, there's something in it. They exist for a reason. We do these things because we do believe we are better at it. We think that if you don't have a conversation and we don't put the right people in the right places, those people will leave and that organization won't come back to us. So it's absolutely in our interest to play the long game here. I've got to find the right people that are going to evolve a culture, not just fit it. I don't agree with culture fits. Someone who's going to take that business forward, fully invested in that process. If we get that right, the candidate will always remember us, but so will the client. And that will lead to more business. So we are relationship builders.
You go for not trying to find someone a job or fulfill a request, but you're all about establishing relationships with people that become like a garden. What about your WhatsApp group? That's interesting.
We've got a couple of WhatsApp groups. They're invite-only leadership groups for HR leaders that are transforming the industry, and the same for payroll as well. I think that a lot of people, and I'm a part of entrepreneur groups of recruiters as well, where they don't always agree with my methods. They think it's very slow to market, and they're probably right. But I'm in it for the long game. I've been doing it for 20 years, and relationships can last a business lifetime. And I'm very proud that many of us do. I think if you go in for the one quick fix and you find that person quickly and you're not really vested in, you might get the quick win, but it doesn't last the length of time that you want it to if you're really trying to build a business on stronger foundations. So that's what the WhatsApp groups are about. That's what the podcasts are about. It's what everything we do, really trying to add value, raise the profile of the profession, and hopefully build some brilliant relationships.
What would someone who's get from your WhatsApp group? How would they sign up, and what would they learn from it?
They can drop me a message, nick@jgarecruitment.com for short. And there are some rules that we ask every member to agree to. It just keeps the group fair and confidential and keeps the conversation on the right channel and the right way. We do only invite leaders into the group. So these are HR directors, CPOs, senior professionals that are changing the game, if you like, and the same for the payroll side. And it's a safe space where people can share ideas, share challenges, share strategic insights, share value creative ideas, to a safe place for people just to have a conversation. We know that, and you'll know this from your coaching background, Robert, the higher up you go, the more lonely it can become. People always look upwards. Everyone's asking you for advice, but you've got no peer group to ask for it for yourself. So it gives people a safe space to go, I've got this challenge. How did someone else handle it? What would you do? And just a safe place for people to converse. And it's worked very successfully so far. So we're very
How do they find out? How would I recommend it to someone? How would they find out about your WhatsApp group? Where do they go?
It is offline, so if we don't advertise it, it is invite only. So the best thing to do is put them in touch with myself, and I will very, very happily and very openly welcome them in if they're at the right level and they can add value and they're willing to be part of a conversation. Please get in touch for sure. I'd love to welcome them in.
All right. Well, you generate a lot of positive energy and enthusiasm. Enthusiasm, the root of the word, is possessed by God. So that may be the case.
You're very kind.
You're
I really enjoyed it.
I see you must be working very, very hard. 3 podcasts and 3 WhatsApp groups, and with the staff, and then trying to drive revenue and profits. You really you must be burning the midnight oil on some occasions.
Sometimes, but I'm very passionate. When you've got passion for something, you find the energy for it, right? So the energy I get is from people like yourself. You give me the energy to keep going. That's the truth. I thoroughly enjoy the conversation. Sometimes I leave these podcasts exhausted. Sometimes I leave energized. This is definitely an energized conversation. You've given me energy today that I'll take on for the rest of my day today. So that's what it's all about. If you're enjoying what you do, then you love it and you don't mind doing the hours. It's when you don't enjoy it, it's time to change.
You're beautiful. All right. Well, see you later, and thank you very much. And let's stay in contact.
I'd love that, Robert. Thank you ever so much. Your insights have been incredible. I hope our listeners have enjoyed it as much as I have. And thank you ever so much for everyone joining us today on the HR L&D podcast. Robert Hargrove, thank you ever so much. This episode is sponsored by Deel. That's Deel. Deel is your forever people platform built for global payroll and HR. So whether you're an enterprise business, a small company, or something in between, Deel works for your team. Hire and onboard talent in over 150 countries in minutes and run payroll in over 100 countries in just a few clicks. And with Deel's suite of AI-powered learning and development tools, you can even customize career roadmaps, performance assessments, and more. So are you ready to transform your global payroll and HR processes? If you are, click the link in the show notes to book a demo with Deel today. That's Deel.